Well, good evening, everyone. Seems like it's been a while since I've been here. We've got 8 Wednesday nights left and about 15 things to do. So we're going to have to double up, and that's what we're going to do tonight. That's our plan, to cover 2 of them. And the good thing about them is they're both in the same verse. They're 2 distinct things, but they're in the same verse. So it shouldn't be a problem to do that. I'm not going to ask you if you play the lottery. We might have to have an altar call, after our Bible class. But does anybody know what the amount is? I meant to look at it this afternoon when I rode by there. But when you're on Turner McCall Boulevard at 5 o'clock going across the bridge there in front of CVS, you need to be paying attention to the other people there. Does anybody have any idea how much it is? 150 million?
Yeah, one person in Arkansas won 1.6 billion. Just one person.
Well, let me ask you this. How many of you would like to win the lottery?
I think about it every time I go by that sign.
Well, I tell you something that I think is true is if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you can't win the lottery. And I've never bought one. We've had that thing about 25 years. But they mailed me one. The Chrysler place over in Carville had a mail out and mailed everybody a lottery ticket. You had to go over there and let them check it and see. Of course, nobody won anything, But, well, let me tell you something. If you're here tonight and you're a Christian, you have already won the 2 most important prizes, more important than any lottery could ever be. I don't care if it's billions or trillions. I preached a sermon one time about when Jesus said, "What shall a man profit if he, loses his soul? What shall he profit if he gain the whole world and loses his soul?" I looked up to see what the worth of the world was. It's in the trillions of dollars of wealth in the world. And Jesus was right. If you had all the wealth in the world and lost your soul, it wouldn't be worth it. Who remembers what Ben Carson said about the lottery, winning the lottery? He said this: if you were born in America, and if you've been born into the family of God, you've already won the biggest lottery in the world. Is that not right? Now, I hope when we go home tonight, we think of ourselves as winners and not, people who play the lottery and gamble. They're all prisoners of hope. Prisoners of hope. But we have won the best and biggest and most important lottery in the world. Being born in the family of God and being born in America. Now, I bring that up because we're going to be talking about family tonight. One of our one another passages, and these are going to be the first one another passages that actually get more specific. We've talked about love and spent a lot of time talking about the body concept, and then we talked about the importance of love. But let's go over to Romans chapter 12, and verse 10 is the verse that we're going to be looking at. Most of your letters in the New Testament are divided by some people into what's called a theological part and a practical part. That's true with Ephesians. It's certainly true with Romans. In the book of Romans, the first 11 chapters are theology in a way, in a sense. And then beginning in chapter 12, the rest of the book is called practical. Now, I believe that theology is practical. And what he says in the, quote, practical part comes out of the theology part. And so to me, theology is practical. But the theology in 1 through 11 is the background for the practical. Now, it's important to notice that we're going to be looking at our verse from Romans chapter 12. because that begins the practical section. In other words, he starts talking about, relationships and getting along with each other and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, I've got a whole book in my library on Romans chapter 12. It's called The Hilarity of Community. And the reason it's called Hilarity of Community is because if you look in verse 8 there, and it says, or he who exhorts, we're jumping in the middle of a sentence, in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with what? Cheerfulness. What's the verse that says the Lord loves a cheerful giver? Well, if you were to literally transliterate those Greek words into English words, it wouldn't be cheerful, it would be hilarious. God loves a hilarious giver. And here we're supposed to have one who shows mercy, he's supposed to show it with hilarity. Now, I'll admit, their use of the word back then doesn't carry exactly the same nuance that we attach to that word today. It means happy or cheerful or something. It doesn't mean, when I see somebody that's hilarious, what do you see? You think somebody being hilarious? Yeah. Most preachers' jokes are not hilarious. They think they are. They think they are, but they're not. But mine are if I ever, But it's still the same word. It's still the same word. And it just kind of evolved and to have that additional aspect to it the way we look at the word hilarity today. And so he goes on to say in verse 9, let love be without hypocrisy. And I think we looked at that. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Michael, is Michael in here? There's you a 3-point sermon right there, sir. Let love be without hypocrisy. There's point 1. Abhor what is evil. There's point 2. And cling to what is good. There's point 3. All you got to do is have a poem and invitation song, and that'll work. Now, verse 10. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Now, like we said, there's 2 things here, so let's go back and kind of introduce what we're talking about. The body concept that we began with clearly tells us several things about, the church. It tells us about our interdependency. It tells us about the importance of each individual part. It tells us about really equality of importance. I had to buy a little part for my car the other day. I'm going to always use illustrations about cars because I'm all the time working on my old cars, But, you can have a $50,000 or $60,000 car and something like a thermostat go out. I had to replace the thermostat in my car the other day before I could drive it. Okay? How much does the thermostat cost, Kim? About $10? $10 is what the thermostat was. But until I got that thermostat replaced, guess what? I couldn't drive that car. So every part is important, and we belabored that point, but it's well worth the time, in my opinion. And so as he says here, the body concept that we begin with clearly shows that each believer, no matter what his status in life is necessary and important in God's order of things. The human body serves as a practical illustration, but as with all analogies, it can only go so far in describing reality. Its most significant contribution is to illustrate how the church functions. The family concept gives us an even greater appreciation of what a functioning church should be. The concept of the family gives us a greater appreciation. No, I skipped a line there or jumped back. The concept of the family adds a dimension of warmth, tenderness, concern, and loyalty. In short, human emotion and devotion. And so talking about our relationships as a family brings a whole new dimension to it. A whole new dimension to how a church works and our relationships in that church. So that's why we sang the song. We're all part of the family of God. That's why we mentioned the thing about what Ben Carson said about the lottery. He said that he was born in America, and if you know Dr. Ben Carson's situation, if you even know who he is, you know, he was born to a single parent, and that lady by herself reared him, and he became one of the leading neurosurgeons in the entire United States. He performed some surgeries that nobody else could do. So why was that? He was born in America and had the opportunity. Everybody got the same opportunity, but not everybody takes advantage of it like he did, and like his mother worked with him on that. So that brings us to our first one another passage tonight, where Paul says here, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Now, I know that your translation may read differently here, different from mine. The King James, I think, says be kindly affectioned to one another. The Old American Standard says tenderly affectioned. And mine says simply be devoted to one another. So all those help us understand what he's trying to say here. But let's look at this first word. Would anybody like to say that word for us? That word there with all caps. It's a word from the original language. Philostorgos. And really it's got two parts to it. Phileo is one of the four types of love that we have in the original language. You know, eros, agape. We'll look at storge and phileo, which is the word here. It's a combination word. And then the word storge, that's another word for love. So you got two different words for love in one word here. And so phileo is simply friendly love, tender affection. But storge brings another dimension to it. It's love of kindred, especially of parents for children and children for parents. And so this covers a whole gamut of family love. There should be a natural love and affection in a family. You should have a certain type of love for your brothers and your sisters and your parents, and that extends on out to your cousins, you know. So that's the kind of love that we're talking about, and that's the kind of love that we have, that we're challenged to do here in this verse. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And so that's the first word. Be devoted to one another, or be kindly affectionate. It's kind of hard to translate. That's why there's so many different renderings of it. But it all boils down to a family type of love. Now, be devoted, he says, to one another in brotherly love. Give preference. Well, let's look at the brotherly love. There's another word right there. This is a combination word. It's got the form of phileo in the front of it. And literally, the word is spelled exactly the way the city in Pennsylvania is. Philadelphia. That's exactly how the original Greek word is spelled. It doesn't have any, beginnings or endings or anything. That's just it right there. And so, what does it mean? What does Philadelphia mean? What's the city of Philadelphia called? Anybody ever been to Philadelphia? What's the nickname or their big thing? The city of brotherly love. Now, I had a friend that went up there, and while he was parked in the motel one night, somebody broke in his van and stole everything he had. So he has a little different concept of Philadelphia. He would not call it the city of brotherly love. But that's an accurate, designation or characterization for that because of that word Philadelphia. And so it's the same thing here, brotherly love, and we're to be devoted. I want to kind of focus on that word devoted for just a minute. What would you say, since that's the way it's translated in mine, what's the root of that word, or what's the root idea of devoted that kind of gives us an indication of how strong that word should be? I'll give you a hint. The first two letters of the word with three letters is V-O-W. Vow. We're to be devoted to one another with the strength of a vow. That's the whole sense of the word. We're to be devoted to one another. That means that I'm devoted to you and you're devoted to my welfare, as if we had taken a vow to have that in our relationship. And so that's why I like that particular word. What if you read Tom Sawyer and know about all that Huckleberry Finn, what did they do to cement their relationship? Anybody remember what they did? Okay, a bunch of us doing this, but what? You can speak up. Blood brothers. They cut themselves and put their hands together and shared their blood, which nobody would do that today, but for fear of disease and so forth. But that made them a blood brother. I don't know what else you could do to indicate, your relationship with someone and then cut yourself and bleed all over each other, But that's the way they indicated it. So this is a pretty strong thing. Be devoted to one another. There's your word, allelon, in brotherly love. That's the action, and that's the attitude, I guess you could say. Be devoted to one another. That's the action, and the attitude is, or the approach would be in brotherly love. Now let's see if we got some questions for that. Yes.
I don't have a question, but my Bible has an asterisk after there, and it says, honor one another above yourselves.
Yeah, that's the next one. That's the second one another passage in this verse. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get there in just a minute. We're not. Yeah, we're gonna have some questions about this one, then we're gonna move on to that one. Okay, there are some other passages. I will leave that up to you to read them. There's a lot we can learn about brotherly love, but I do want to try to get the other one in. Number 2, what common terminology do we use to address one another that is based on the family analogy? We'll call each other brothers and sisters. And what would you say is probably the most often way God is addressed in the Bible? Or Father. He's our heavenly Father. Our Father who art in heaven. Okay? Why is he called our Father? Well, he's the head of our family. I call my father Father because he's the head of my family. And my brothers and sisters, we're part of that family. So I would say, and we get back to the body concept, we have a way that we use that concept in our terminology. And what is that? What do we call our church people sometimes? Members. Members. Why do we call them members? Because they're members of the body. They're part of the body. So it's just a little comparison there to help us relate and understand and appreciate what we have in the church. Number 3, how does a person normally become a member of a family? You're born into it. You're born into a family. We are physically born into our physical family. The Jews, they were physically born into the Jewish family. But how are people born into the family of God today? It's a spiritual birth. So how are people born into the family of God today? Through baptism. Through baptism. I think that's like 2 or 3 more questions down here about that. But anyway, what's another way a person can become a member of a family? Adoption. Yeah. She said marriage, and you know, that's right. Adoption. Anybody in here ever adopted a child? I have. Does an adopted child have all the same rights as a normally born child? Exactly. And then number 6, how does a person become a member of the family of God? We're the new birth, born of the water and the Spirit, baptism. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 12:13. That's going to talk about that, but I want us to see what he says there. Would somebody like to read 12 and 13, please?
For just as the body is one, and yet has many members, and all of the members of the body, though many, are one body, so too is Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body. Whether Jews or Greek, or slaves or free, we were all made to drink of the one Spirit. Okay, so, and what he's emphasizing in these verses here is unity and oneness. You know, but by the same Spirit, we were all baptized, or by one Spirit, into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one. There's 3 things in there that he emphasizes. You know, it was done by one Spirit, one body, and then we were all made to drink of one Spirit. So those 3 aspects just in that one verse tells us, the unity. And then he goes on into that great dissertation that we've already looked at beginning in verse 14 about the body and how the body, and that we're all part of the body, and so on and so forth. Number 8, evaluate your attitudes and actions toward other members of your Christian family. To what extent do you experience emotion and affection toward each fellow Christian? When you see another Christian, especially a Christian here, that you see on a regular basis, how do you look at them? What are your feelings toward them? You know, lots of people don't live, in the same town with their children or close relatives, and don't get to see them very often. And when they do get to see them, they're happy. They enjoy it. We went down to see our daughter. It's a long way, but we went. We went, and we enjoyed being down there. I wish she was here. But, and my grandson, I wish he was here, because I like to be around them, and we miss them. And so that's because we are a family. We are part of a family. Now, is every family perfect? No. Is every... Huh? No. We've already had enough people answer that one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Never got along. I didn't like them, and they didn't like me. Yep. Y'all remember my generation. Here at Oak Hill one time.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole point. Not everybody's perfect. There's no perfect church, no perfect eldership, and I'm going to speak for myself. There's no perfect preacher that I know. We're not perfect. We're human beings, and as hard as we try, we're not going to be perfect. And that kind of brings me back to something I was going to mention earlier. Let's go ahead and finish out these questions. Think about your actions. Are you as excited about seeing each other, as you are maybe your family that you haven't seen? When we go back to, and all of you have done this. You have all gone back to churches where you used to attend probably on a regular basis. Maybe it's been years since you were there, maybe a few months or something, but isn't it good to see those people because they were part of your family? And they still are in a very real sense of the word. And we, when you go somewhere, I went to 2 different churches while we were in the Keys, and we've been to both of them before, but still it's like going back and seeing family, And it's been that way since the first time we visited each one of those churches. And so that's the way it should be. And again, nobody's perfect. Not everybody's perfect, and we understand that. Number 9, some Christians find it hard and difficult to identify with other Christians at the feeling level. Can you think of any reasons for this? Now, how would you characterize the feeling level? I think open, honest. What else?
Trustworthy.
Okay. I think that's the problem is sometimes we don't really trust each other to tell them to be open. I am an open book. What you see is what you get. Isn't that right, Daryl? I mean, Daryl's known me for a long time. I can't hide behind a facade if I wanted to,
She wants us to be honest here in this Bible class right now. Okay, because I'm willing to do that.
Yeah.
Because if you ask me a question like, do I miss my generation? And seeing them here, going back from the 90s, no, I don't miss my generation at all.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back here.
Well, that's something else that's interesting. I've been kind of studying about, every generation has got a name now. I don't even know what we're up to. I know that I'm a boomer. How many boomers we got? If you're a boomer, you should know that. If you're Gen Z or Gen X or, whatever, that's a whole different ball game. But every generation's got its own peculiar characteristics, and I can't even keep up with all of them. But anyway, and then number 10, is it possible to be devoted to one another in brotherly love without expressing any significant emotion toward one another? We're going to vote on it? Is it possible to be devoted? Remember what talked about that word. It's a strong word. It's to be committed to someone with the strength of a vow. Committed to their welfare and their well-being with the strength of a vow. Is it possible to be devoted to one another in brotherly love without expressing any significant emotion toward one another? No. You can't do that. Y'all talk too much. Any questions or more comments about that particular? I do want to get on to the other one because at least we'll introduce it. The second part of that same verse. Paul says to honor one another above yourselves. Honor one another above yourselves. And there's your word there, alelon. My translation says give preference to one another. And I like what my margin says. This is the neatest thing because We talked about, we kind of joshed around about it a little bit. My margin says, outdo one another in showing honor. Outdo one another in showing honor. In other words, if I honor you, what do you got to do? Honor back, but you got to outdo. You got to step it up one. And then what do I got to do? I got to step it up again. And then what do you got to do? I mean, it's never-ending, continual outdo one another, in honor. So we have that obligation to honor one another. And another part of it is above yourselves. Above yourselves. That means you put other people's interests above yourself. The definition of honor, and I really don't know what you have on your outline there. Let's see. To exalt or to respect greatly. In Gene Getz's book on this, Building Up One Another, that I told you about when we started, he tells a story of a man who was a musician. And when you play in an orchestra, what's your job, really, if you play in an orchestra? Huh? Okay, to do your part, to blend in. You're not supposed to get up there and try to outdo everybody with what you're doing. You know, if you're on the drums and it's a quiet part of the song, you're just not supposed to start beating on your drum. You know, I mean, I'll give you an example. I don't know if any of you know who the Mavericks are. It's a kind of a halfway country something from Cuba. Raul Melo died just a few weeks ago, you know, and Carol and I went to see him. I really like them. And their songs are rather long. But anyway, in a typical song, you got horns, you got 2 or 3 or 4 horns. You got a guy playing a piano or an organ or something. You got 2 or 3 different guys on guitars. And you got a guy on an accordion, you know, and all them. And Raul, he was the leader. And he was the lead singer. And so all throughout the song, usually each person gets to kind of show off their thing, whether it's not the drummer, but usually all the other people get kind of a lead, you know, in there and get to play the piano or whatever it is, you know. But then the horns play. Then, you know, goes through each one, the accordion and the lead guitar and all that stuff. But when it comes back, when they all stop doing their own thing, what's their job? To make Raul look good. To make him sound. That's not the time for them to blare out real loud with their instrument. They have their chance, and that's okay. But overall, their part is to make other people look good and make him sound good. That's the thing. That's how we honor one another above ourselves, to make other people look good. Did not Jesus do that when he left heaven and came to this earth? Let's look at Philippians chapter 2 right quick. Starts in about verse 5, I guess, where we can start. Really even go back to verse 3. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. That's where you start with learning to honor one another above yourself, and that is by, not look out for your own interests, and regard another as more important than yourself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests. Doesn't mean that you neglect everything you've got to do. I used to use, when we lived up in the northern part of the state of Maine, the big thing in the summertime was getting your wood for winter. They got 2 seasons up where we lived. winter and getting ready for winter. And so if somebody wasn't able to get their wood in, then we as Christians, what was our responsibility? We need to look out for them. Now, it doesn't mean you let your own business go. But, be concerned about other people. It said regard one another as more important than yourself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped or held on to. In other words, he didn't hold on to it and refuse to let go. But he emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men. And so Jesus is a perfect example of putting other people's interests above his own. Jesus, the God of the universe, put our interests above his. What would have been his interest in that whole deal? What would have been in the interest of Jesus?
Not having to die.
Right. Stay in heaven. Stay in heaven. But what did he do? He emptied himself. He divested himself, and there's a whole theological discussion about what did he empty himself of, and we're not getting into that now, but although he existed in the form, and the word there is morphe, which means essential form, in the form of God, basically he was God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be held on to. But he let it go. Why? Because he put our interest above his own, and we are to have that same attitude. Have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who existed in the form of God, but emptied himself. So Jesus is the ultimate example of how we honor one another. There's nothing we can ever do that will equal what Jesus did for us. And so there are other verses there. Jesus, as usual, sets the example. We looked at Philippians chapter 2, and in John 13, that's when he washed the disciples' feet. Remember that situation? They were all gathered around the table, and Jesus took up a towel and started washing the disciples' feet. What did Peter say? Peter wasn't having any of that. He wasn't having any part of that. Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. Jesus said, if I don't wash your feet, you're not going to have anything to do with me. He said, Lord, not my feet, but also my hands and my heart. So those two examples of the God of the universe washing the feet, and that's just about as low a thing as you could do. Usually the servants did that. Usually the servants did that. If you had a guest come into your home, you didn't do that. You let the servants do that. Now, if you didn't have a servant, you might do it yourself. So those are two great examples of Jesus himself. And so we still have a couple of minutes, and I hate to rush through this, but I want to get as many of these in as we can. Here's some questions. What is it usually a sign of when someone puts another person down? Huh?
Jealousy.
Okay. Well, it's insecurity, a bad self-image. You're putting them down in order to make yourself look better. So if anybody ever does that to you, just realize it's their problem, not yours. They've got a problem, and the only way they can live with themselves is to put other people down and make themselves think that they're better. Is it necessarily wrong to want to be great? No. What pathway is necessary for the Christian to take so that he may truly be great? What did Jesus say, about that? He that would be greatest among you must do what? Become servant of all. The way to greatness is the towel. a towel. When I was in the insurance industry and insurance and financial services industry, every quarter the leading agent got to pick any restaurant they wanted to go to in Atlanta, and the management team had to take them over there. So I went a couple of times. We went to, I call it Benny Ha Ha's. I think it's Benny Ha Na's. We went there one time and went to a couple of places. One time we went to the Lark and the Dove, and it was nice. And of course we didn't have to pay for our meal, but I went in the restroom and there was a guy standing there with a towel over his arm. Now, all my life I have washed and dried my own hands. And I'm sorry, I wasn't about to let that guy dry my hands. But that's what he was there for, you know. And the towel is the way to greatness, not tyranny. The towel and not tyranny is the way to greatness. He that would be great among you, let him become servant of all. So basically, the way up is down, isn't it? The way up is down. What did Jesus give up in coming to this earth? Everything. We can't imagine. We think about all the people that were persecuting him, the pain, the suffering on the cross, how hard that was, all of his disciples rejecting him, you know, and all the trials and tribulations he went through, and that was great. That was all a part of the sacrifice for our sins. But think about this. The step that Jesus took from being God in heaven to being a man on earth. That's just beyond my comprehension. Him coming to earth was probably the greatest part of the sacrifice. And that's not saying anything negative about the sacrifice of Christ. We understand that. But he had to get here. And it took a whole lot for him to get here to be able to make that sacrifice. Was there any way he could benefit from doing this? In other words, did Jesus have any ulterior motive in coming to this earth other than to give himself as a sacrifice for our sins? No. There was nothing for him to gain. When he went back to heaven, he got all the glory back that he had lost. All that was restored. That was what he prayed for in John chapter 17. You know, return to me the glory that I had before. So he got his glory back, but what else was there? Did it cost him anything? Oh, me.
Agony and pain.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Practical steps for applying this principle today. How many situations can you recall where you purposely attempted to honor someone above yourself? You know, like I say, when we did this one time, we started going around and say, "Oh, I honor you. Ken, I honor you." "Oh, no, I honor you more." Well, that was just playing. Really, really honoring somebody and putting them above yourselves. Making somebody else look good. Making somebody else look good. And not putting people down to make yourself look good. If it is difficult for you to compliment others and enjoy their successes, take a close look at your personality. Well, there are a couple of cases in the book that are not there. What are some things, and finally, what are some things that we can do to honor one another? Okay.
Recognize talent.
Huh?
Recognize talent.
Okay. Express appreciation for something that somebody does. You know, compliment them, encourage them. You know, and most of it's going to be verbal. Most of it's going to be verbal. I can't think of any other way. You know, you don't have to say something. You know, Honor one another above yourselves. One of my teachers named Parker Henderson, he was quite a person. He was very humble. As far as I can recall, he's about the most humble man I know. And yet he was honored in so many ways. He was a missionary in Thailand. He came back and taught at the School of Preaching at Sunset where I was. And then he ended up being in, where'd Parker go? I'm having a brain freeze. It was No, it was somewhere, some other foreign country. I'll think of it on the way home. But anyway, he was as humble as anybody could be. And yet he was given an award. He graduated from, Abilene Christian, and he received, in 1980, the Alumnus of the Year award. That's a pretty big honor. And he wouldn't brag about it, you know. I'll tell you a story. This will be a good one to end with because our time's about gone. When he was a little boy, he stole a pack of chewing gum from this store. And it bothered him all his life that he stole that pack of chewing gum. Over the years, to make up for that, he bought groceries from that store. All the groceries he bought when he could, he bought them from that store. But he wanted to go back and pay that store back. And I don't know if it was the same person there or somebody else, but anyway, he was in town. He was in that town for a gospel meeting. He said, I'm going to take care of this while I'm there. So of course, he didn't want anybody to know about it, you know. But he went in there one day and said, look, my name is Parker Henderson. Said, when I was a little boy, I stole a pack of chewing gum from this store. He says, I want to pay you for that pack of chewing gum. And they gave him $1. The chewing gum was probably only a nickel back then, you know. But anyway, the next day in the newspaper, there was a story, renowned preacher goes back and pays for a pack of chewing gum that he stole when he was a little boy. So, you know, there he was trying to do something right, and but that's okay. At least he had a good conscience anyway about it. But go in peace, be you.